Hello, it's Anna and Sophie from Soundyard here. We make Chris Skinner's Countryside podcast, and we've got something very exciting to share with you. We have a new service that's being launched, and it's called Spoken Stories.
Spoken Stories is all about recording the voices and memories of your loved ones in outstanding quality, so they can be enjoyed for generations to come. For example, you know the story that Grandma tells that everyone in the family has heard before. Well, Spoken Stories is about getting those stories down and preserving them for your family history. Spoken Stories is about gifting someone the time to capture these personalities and unique voices.
We record your loved ones' tales, whether it's their whole life story so far or something more specific like a life-changing event. It is a gorgeous experience, and what you're left with is a beautiful monologue that really captures the essence of that person.
Think of it like an audio portrait, and take a listen to a snippet of this one from Diane's spoken story, recorded in her beautiful garden.
I was born in 1951 at Newmarket, and unfortunately I didn't see Mum for a year. I was looked after by a lovely nurse called Diane, my name, because my mum had TB when I was born. And so my mother never worked because with her problem with her, lungs, she had to go and have it sort of pumped up every so often. She used to do a lot of dressmaking, so she always made our clothes years ago. But yeah, she was a lovely mum, yeah, and Dad as well, yeah. That's very nice childhood I had, yeah, very nice. Yeah. I got married February the 16th, 1974. The weather was gorgeous. I ended up putting a big sort of T-shirt under my wedding dress I didn't need. I had a lovely one of those transparent umbrellas in case it rained, and it was just a beautiful day. I think I'm always sort of quite cheerful. I mean, if I go down the Luke and deliver some eggs to somebody, I'll meet somebody and chat, and then Paul say, "Where have you been?" I said, "I've been chatting to people." That's just my way. That's just how I am. We've always lived here. We had this built in 1974. They put the footings down in February and we moved in the August. Years ago, I used to go around the village on a bike, and when I had Ian, he'd sit on the back. We live in a lovely area. We've got lovely neighbours. They help us all out, which you all do with neighbours, and that's very, very nice. And as I said to Paul, I'm hoping we can keep this place on until, well, I don't want to move from here until I go out in a brown box. I hope that's not too soon.
If you'd like more information about Spoken Stories and to take advantage of our special introductory offer, you can head to www.soundyard.org/spoken stories.
And keep listening after this episode with Chris, and you'll hear another example of a spoken story. It's a view of the world from a 6-year-old.
Oh, Chris, butterfly season. Yes, Matthew. Hot day. We're in woodland, actually, and one has just alighted on the ground right in front of us. It's in perfect condition. It's a red admiral, one of our migrant species, a really powerful flyer, and it's opened its wings up and it's in fantastic condition. There's a high chance that the one we're looking at has spent the winter here at Hyash Farm, and its parent has laid its eggs on nettles, and it's just hatched out because it doesn't look as though it's flown 1,000 miles or more from southern France where you're likely to see them.
No, he looks in lovely condition. Those red flashes and the black and the white as well, and he's quite large.
Yes, it's a 2.5, nearly 70 mil wingspan. Rat's with us, and that was fortunate. He stopped about a foot away, and it's one of our aristocrat species, hence Red Admiral. It comes from admirable, which really means very splendid. So all the early entomologists chose the most flamboyant names for it. And it's just basking in the sunshine. It's called Red Admiral, but it's actually bright orange on the wings. And the tips, the sun's just come out. The tips have got all white spots on, then some glorious orange, almost in a circle, and the upper side of the wings, and then furry black in the centre, which kind of accentuates the orange colour. Just spoilt. And this is a sort of clearing where we could see some of our other native species, things like speckled wood. We've got a lot here in this area of woodland, and you have these kind of shafts of sunlight coming through, and it's closed its wings.
It looks like he's disappeared.
Absolutely, and that's
Perfectly.
typical of many of the butterfly species. So it's one that can hibernate as an adult, and with the wings closed, it almost looks like a dried up leaf on the woodland floor. And something else just flitted past us. I'm not sure what that was.
If we didn't know he was there, we wouldn't see him, would we?
No, absolutely not. Yeah, it's so really wonderful. But this is peak season for those speckled wood butterflies, which are demure little butterflies. You often think of them as very tranquil. But with the speckled wood, which I'm keeping my eyes peeled for as we're standing here watching.
And they don't like me, do they, speckled woods? Because whenever I'm with you, they never appear.
No, they're very aggressive, and I see them 2 or 3 times a day if I'm travelling through these areas of woodland. Sort of chocolatey brown colour with really almost yellow little circles on the upper side of the wings. The females are actually more attractive and more clearly marked than the males. And anything but demure, because any other butterfly, even a thundering great red admiral like we're looking at the moment, anybody else flying past, they'll come out and attack straight away. So they kind of defend their little patches of sunlight, and the reason they do that is because that's where the females will come and visit as well, and then the males will mate with them. But the males are much less sort of distinguished in their colours. They're much more blurred, whereas the females are really beautiful. Oh, and that admiral has just opened up its wings again for us. That's a cracking way to start off this week's podcast, and we hope we'll repeat it as we go out on the farm. We're travelling through the woodland to one of the pollen and nectar fields, because we're going to do something else unusual. We used to look for moths, but it's broad daylight. No, I know, it's nothing to do with having too much sun today. It's one of those special species, special time of year for them. And what we'll do is keep our fingers crossed for 5 and 6 spot burnet moths. We might be lucky. You never know when you go on a wildlife hunt. But that in front of us, see if we can get a little bit closer. They're generally quite nervous. But there we are. Oh, and off it flits. Just
Nearly crashes straight into us.
yes, and beautiful, beautiful way to start the podcast for this week. And Rat's here as well with us, being very well behaved, travelling through, and he says, come on, let's go and do some proper work. There's not much here to sniff at all, but the deer have been eating all the undergrowth, and that's the remnants of the bluebells, the little dried up paper cups, all full of their seed, Matthew, ready to come out. So if you pull the little stalks out, which are paper-like stalks, tiny cup-like cases, just tip them upside down like that, and there's the next generations of bluebell seeds in my hand. A dozen or so jet black seeds, shiny, drop onto the woodland floor now if the pheasants haven't eaten them. And then the leaves come down, September and October cover them up, and they germinate in November, December, in tiny little, it looks like a tiny crop of grass on the woodland floor, and that's the next generation of bluebells coming along, and they'll form a bulb in the end of their first year, about the size of a match head, and start it all over again. Nature's wonderful.
It's lovely to come into the woodlands, but we're heading out further onto the farm now. So stay with us here on this latest edition of the Chris Skinner Countryside Podcast with Chris Skinner, and Rat Skinner has come with us today, haven't you?
Here he is.
Yeah. On we go.
Chris Skinner's Countryside Podcast with Matthew Gudgeon.
come out onto one of the wildflower fields here. It should be prime butterfly country, this. But Chris, you having a little chuckle there?
Yes, I was chuckling because we were then going to walk into this field, and sometimes I search for hours looking for a particular species, and one flew right towards us and landed on the grass right in front of us. Let's see if we can see him or her.
There?
And he's facing slightly the wrong way.
Red wing?
Red, well, it's not red, it's not purple, it's called vermilion.
Thanks, vermilion.
It's a really odd colour. It's halfway between the two. And this is a 6-spot burnet moth, and it's not being very obliging, but it might turn round. It's on one of its favourite food plants at the moment, which is knapweed, and there's lots of it growing here, and crystal vetch as well. Oxeye daisies are just about finished, and there's another one over there.
Flying, that one.
That's a flying, and it's a moth, Matthew, a day flying moth. And when you see one together like this, you'll often see dozens of them because they're colonial. They live in huge numbers in a particular spot. And the one near us has just taken off and gone to look for the mate over here. Let's just see if we can follow this one. We feel like a couple of Victorian butterfly collectors. And it's still flitting away, just flying very slowly. They're rather cumbersome flyers, but I'm keeping my eye on it. And it's still flying. Oh, two.
Oh, there's 2 or 3 there.
3. That's exactly what I wanted to see. Let's hope they land and we can go and have a closer look at some of the colours on them, because they are quite exquisite. They're all in the air at the moment.
The wings are going 19 to the dozen, aren't
Yes, yeah, let's just walk in a little bit and see if we can find one that's settled down. The wind will often, it isn't moving the plants around so much. They're meadow browns we just disturbed. And it's a fantastic year for our commonest butterfly, the meadow brown. Many people say there's a distinct lack of butterflies this year, but here, because these wildflower fields have been established over such a long time now, there's a kind of resident population built up, and it doesn't really vary much between the years now that I've discovered. So let's just see if we can find one of these elusive moths. Nice honeybee there, feeding on the knapweed, gathering the pollen on its legs. Grasshopper creeping through the undergrowth just there. And
Mere movement in the undergrowth, and it's rat.
yes, he's just rejoined us. He's enjoying this because there's lots of nice scents around. Now he's decided to roll in the wildflowers, which isn't very helpful. And I can see something which is a huge clue here. Just look at this oxeye daisy stem, and it looks a little bit unusual.
Yes, there's some growth, isn't there?
Yes, it's the larval case of the 6-spot burnet moth, and it's just emerged. I can pull that up because it's actually emerged and has flown off. And just as they emerge, it leaves this little black pupal case there, and the case is almost paper-like and translucent, and that's...
Is that part of it as well, that lighter?
Yes, this bit.
It almost looks like part of the plant.
It absolutely is incredible, isn't it? And this is the little pupal case that the 6-spot burnet moth probably emerged out of this morning and has flown out, and it's one of those that's flying all around us. We'll get up close to one in a moment. This is quite amazing. So it kind of welds itself to the plant stalk like this, and it's translucent. So if you hold it up to the light, now it's empty without the moth in there.
It's about 1 inch long.
Yes, and that's the little case that it was in, and it's just popped out on the ground, and then you're left with this little transparent sheath, just perfect like that, and really beautiful. And so I did say they're kind of lazy moths because they'll just spend their entire life in one particular area. And this is one of the areas on the farm where I'm pretty well guaranteed to see them. And they're poisonous. They're brightly coloured. The green and the vermilion red colour on the top of the wings serves as a warning to birds. And early butterfly collectors used to collect burnet moths, the 5 and 6 spot burnets, as well as the forester moths as well, which are closely related. And they'd put them in their cyanide bottles, and the moths would be hovering around in there almost untouched. And that's because they've got hydrogen cyanide in their bodies, which they harvest from their food plant, which is right in front of us here, and it's birdfoot trefoil. And the trefoil plants have quite a high concentration of hydrogen cyanide in their sap, and the butterflies take that on board and use it as a kind of deterrent for birds, because if you're flying about a sort of slow flying insect like a burnet moth, then you're quite vulnerable to birds. And that's why that little pupil case that we saw is about 8 or 9 inches up the stalk. That means most birds wouldn't be able to find it. It's completely camouflaged, so it's kind of a insurance against being predated. But if a bird did actually catch a burnet moth, it would quickly spit it out because it's got a kind of yellow substance in the body, in the thorax, which it can exude, and it's highly unpalatable. And birds, if one bird did eat one, it would never have a go at another one. So it kind of a lesson is learnt then. So there we are. If we just I stand up again, and we'll just walk back and see if we can catch
There seem to be plenty of them here.
Yes, just here behind us here. Matthew. See what I mean?
Yes.
My eye over the years has learnt to actually find one, and there's one again on its favourite food plant there, which is this knapweed. Knapweed's a really superb summer flower. It looks like a thistle in flower. But in fact it's not too closely related, and it comes into flower late June, all of July and into August, and there's lots to come here, and it's a favourite food because it produces a huge amount of pollen and nectar as well, and that's what this moth is feeding on. It's just getting its energy up, although the food plant for the 6-spot burnet is in fact the bird's foot trefoil, other legumes as well, and vetches and things. Right, it's just turning round now.
I can see the spots really clearly.
Look at that, Matthew. Iridescent green on the body, and it's a perfect, freshly emerged example in broad sunlight, broad daylight in full sun, and it's a moth. And some scientists begin to think that these burnet moths form a transition zone between the butterflies, which you see at this time of the year, and moths, which mainly fly at night, and it's a kind of meeting point where the two species actually start to meet. So it's causing a lot of controversy. Now you can see the spots really clearly on each wing.
Yes, all of them.
3 lots of 2 on each wing.
Bright vermilion.
That's it. That's the correct colour. I mean, it's not red, is it? And it's not purple. There it goes. And
those wings really do go fast, don't
yes, and the wings go off in a blur, and then at the same time it exposes its underwings, which are all vermilion as well. So you kind of have these bright red petticoats flying around, and it finishes off just there, a lovely dark meadow brown butterfly. That's the male down there, just flitting about in the base of the wildflowers here. So there we are, all the little cases, and the caterpillars feed on all these yellow flowers here, the vetches and the bird's foot trefoil, and they're rather dumpy. They're black with little yellow spots on them, and dark green as well on the main part of the body. And so they're quite hard to find, but when I'm harvesting on this field, I've just done a little bit right beside us here, about half an acre, And I haven't cut the plants down. I've just folded them over, and I've been after the yellow rattle, and it's a brilliant year for the yellow rattle seed, and I've been busy sieving that like a old-fashioned gold panner with my sieve in the farmyard underneath the sycamore tree in the centre of the farmyard.
Quite a time-consuming task, isn't it?
It's hugely time-consuming, but the seed goes off all over the UK and helps establish really good quality wildflower fields like this one, where there's not too much grass. When you look down in here, Matthew, you can virtually see no grass whatsoever. It's really unusual. It is all just wildflowers, and that's thanks to that plant there, which you can see lots of there. And I managed to get the seed out of it without harming the flowers themselves.
And you get the right mix of plants, and you end up with species like six-spot burnets.
Yes, you're telling me. Yeah, beautiful and stunningly attractive as well. Two of them just over there, hovering. As you can see, they're quite cumbersome flyers. And this is their patch. It's probably 50 metres by 50 metres. And although there's 100 acres behind us, this is the only point on this particular field where you'll find the burnet moths. They're kind of almost lazy. That's why we call them colonial. They live together in a group, and they kind of like it that way.
Tell you someone else who likes it here. Rat, he's fallen asleep, hasn't he?
Right by our feet. He's rolled himself a little patch, and he's stretched out in the full sun. No, he's decided to get up. Probably a bit hot for him. The hotter, the better, he thinks. And he sunbathes out in the middle of the farmyard on the hottest day on the pea shingle, and you can hardly walk on it. It's that hot. I mean, he loves it. Crazy.
Mad dogs.
An Englishman, I know, before you add it.
The ducks at High Ash Farm going in to roost for an evening. Hey everyone, it's Matthew here, and if you've been enjoying our countryside podcasts, we've got a small favour to ask.
Yes, Matthew. What we're going to do is to ask for a small donation to help run the podcast, and any surplus goes for conservation at High Ash Farm here. And so it's really important. We'd both love to keep the podcast going, and that duck agrees with me, I think.
Well, it's straightforward to donate. You can make a one-off donation or set up a small monthly contribution, and the address is highashfarm.com/podcast.
We're hugely grateful for any support. It means we can keep sharing the stories of the countryside, which I love doing each week, but it's that small amount of costs we need to cover. So thank you very much in advance.
We've come a few hundred yards now, and we're still in sunshine, and we've got a body of water here, which a couple of years ago I came with you, and you were worried stiff because it was absolutely as dry as a bone, but now, lovely clean water.
Yes, Matthew, and dragonflies galore over the top. That's Britain's largest species. That's the emperor dragonfly.
Oh, he's a monster, he is,
yes,
isn't
a
he?
good 3.5-inch wingspan, and these are darters going around the edge of the pond as well. There's several species. Rat, the terrible terrier.
Well, there's lots of dragonflies here.
Yes. Yes, but something else caught my eye as we just drove past, and I've stopped. And can you see what I'm looking at just out here?
I can see a gathering of flies on the surface.
Right, you just watch them for a second.
It looks like they're just not breaking the water, the surface tension.
They're gyrators, and that's Latin for sort of stirring up, causing a commotion. And that's what Rat's doing behind us. They're having a miniature rest at the moment, and they're called whirligig beetles.
Yes, they're round and round.
And the whole family name is Eurators, and that's the group they belong to. Now, they're really unusual because they're usually in perpetual motion. They're just going round very slowly at the moment, and then all of a sudden something happens and they start going round at great speed, and kind of defying logic, because they're on the top, they've got a little air bubble underneath them, and there's about a dozen to 15 all close together, almost in the space of the palm of your hand at the moment, and you can just see silver on some of them.
And they are swimming on the surface there.
And they're surface swimmers. They will dive down, they will eat debris right down in the bottom of this pond, which is about 2 feet deep, and they'll eat live prey as well, things like larvae, and they're beetle-shaped, and they've got little tiny paddles out the side of each of their bodies, 2 paddles each side, and they can go at a huge speed. Now, somebody very cleverly worked out that if humans could swim that fast, you'd be doing just short of 300 kilometres an hour. And that's the speed they go, but in whirligig terms.
I think that I'd like to see you do that, Chris.
I
You'd
know.
be gold medalist at the Olympics.
I think I certainly would. You'd have a job to keep pace with me. And anyway, they're really interesting little creatures. And once you study them carefully... Oh, there's one just going across there. There it goes.
Yes.
You can get a better idea of it, and they leave a little trail behind them usually, and that will come and join its friends. And there's a whole mixture of different pond life on there. There's pond skaters as well. And these whirligigs really fascinate me.
I expect you've got water boatmen in there
Yes,
as well.
there are water boatmen, so when you stand and watch, they will come up to the surface, and there's even the giant green beetles in here as well, and suddenly you'll see the water surface. There's no fish in this particular pond. The water surface will break as though it's heavy drops of rain on it, and that's the water boatman coming up from underneath. So there you start to see the variety of pond life. But these little whirligig beetles are fascinating because they have eyes, but the eye is split into 2 equal halves. One half can look down into the water, and the other half looks above. So they're really strange. So as they swim along, they can see down into the water and above themselves as well. And so they're really being quite lazy at the moment. Maybe it's something to do with the heat and the humidity. But nevertheless, really interesting to see. And then we're just being spoilt by a whole flotilla of dragonflies. I don't know what you call a whole group of dragonflies like this.
A squadron.
Yes, probably hunting and quartering. And there's a pair mating right in front of us here. And, oh, wow.
We got a good view of the one with
Yes.
4 wings.
Yes, that's a darter, that one. Yes, a
You get
short-bodied.
the impression of the beautiful colours.
Yes, that's the green. Yes, so some of the males will have a bright blue body and some will have a bright green body. And if you watch carefully at these ones over here, you will just see the females will dip their posteriors into... There! That one, just curled down. She's laying eggs.
That's going straight into where all the
Into
weed is.
The weed is on the edge of the pond. So she's laying eggs, and occasionally you'll see her abdomen disappear completely into the water, and she will follow it right down, and she will bury herself under the water while she lays her eggs on the underside. We might be able to walk a bit closer and just see her dipping the eggs in. Oh, she's just taken off again. No, she's come back down. Oh, beautiful. So she's actually using her ovipositor and dropping each time she drops the posterior into the water, she's laying an egg. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. And she's obviously just mated, which she was doing a few seconds before we arrived. So absolutely wonderful to see that. And I have watched them time and time again actually curl themselves under the water and then stay underneath for 2 to 3 minutes underneath the water. And bearing in mind they've spent the previous 1 to 2 years, even 3 years, completely underwater in the nymph stage, and then they come out and just spend a few weeks out as adults before they die again. So beautiful. So you see all these different habitats in a small area of countryside which we're standing in, and you start to see what biomass is and biodiversity as well. So they're all chasing each other. These are the perfect conditions for them at the moment. And those whirligig beetles are just still dancing round in the middle of the pond, each carrying out their own little life cycle.
It's a lovely sight here, isn't it? And you'll recall when we came here and it was like desert conditions.
Yes, we walked across the bottom of this pond and it was cracked up like a desert floor just over a year ago, in fact, when we'd had a dry winter. And now it's just booming with wildlife, just wonderful sight. It's a good body of water. It's, 30 metres long and close to 10 metres wide at its widest.
But we can see the bottom, can't we?
Yes,
there?
you can, and that's ideal for wildlife. It doesn't need to be metres deep. Good shallow edges with grass and vegetation all the way around the edges, so wildlife can go in and go out, things like grass snakes, and then all the different insects can carry out their whole life cycle right in front of us. And this little pondweed is ideal for the dragonflies to lay their eggs in. They then hatch out, move down to the bottom, and you have the carnivorous nymphs, as we call them. And the little whirligig beetles are just beginning to wake up and going round in circles now, just starting to get excited.
Round and round they go.
Whirligig beetles.
Well, we're just alongside the Teasel Walk here on the farm, sitting in the farm truck. And what have you just seen, Chris?
Matthew, a peacock butterfly just emerged in perfect condition, and it's feasting on the teasels right beside us, which are just into flower. It's only about 2 feet off the ground on one of the lower teasels. The teasels this year, because of the wet spring, are 8, even 9 feet tall, and they're in full flower at the moment. So I'm waiting for clouded yellows, speckled ladies, speckled woods rather, to come out, because we're right by some woodland here as well. And all sorts of different migratory butterfly species can come in, because we've had some southerly winds in the last day or two, and that peacock has settled just nicely on the teasel and is just feasting away. It's got its wings closed, and that peacock should last through the rest of the summer. That will be the same relation, if you like, of ones that you might see on your Michaelmas daisies, and they hibernate as adults. So all their parents from last spring have all died, laid their eggs on nettles, which we got beside us in the woodland here. The caterpillars then hatch out from the eggs and greedily feed on the nettle leaves, and then they pupate, and the next and final stage is the adult then emerges, and you've got these beautiful, pristine condition butterflies at this time of the year, which is what I'm looking at just over there. Don't know if you can see him. He's just about 8 yards away from us, and on the top of a teasel head, a perfect triangle in jet black, which is really good camouflage for them. Anyway, I think we've got some questions to answer for this week.
We have, and there's an image that's been emailed through from Susan in North Walsham. And Susan wonders what this insect is. There were several in the lawn one evening, all making a terrifying buzzing noise. They look like wasps, but with hard wing cases. Now, I've got the photo here, and I can't even see an insect on there, but you're a more expert person than me.
Yes, I immediately recognised what that was. It's cockchafer beetles on your lawn. And this time of the year is the time of year that the adults fly. They have these very large wing cases, which they raise up, and then the proper wings come out from underneath them, and they're very cumbersome flyers, to say the least. And we're sitting underneath an avenue of oak trees, and most evenings at this time of the year, if I walk along here at dusk and look up against the sky, you can actually see these large cumbersome beetles flying around the canopy, and as I said, they're cumbersome, and I have had them fly into me, and because they're quite large, it's quite a shock. But they're quite colourful, and they're completely harmless, but they also make this droning noise when they fly. In fact, just after the Second World War, they were called doodlebugs. and they made the same kind of noise as the German rockets that came over with the bombs on board, called the Doodlebug bombs. And when the engine stopped, you knew the rocket was about to descend and then explode. And one landed quite close to the farm here, one of those Doodlebug German rockets, about 2 miles away. It went right over the top of High Ash Farm, and then they heard the engines cut, and it landed very close to Shotsham Church, just a few miles away, and landed in some woodland and blew some of the tiles off Shotsham Church, but luckily nobody was hurt.
Now here's an email from the States, and Kathy, listening in America. I always enjoy the podcast, Chris, and particularly enjoyed the one about ducklings. I live on a salt marsh in Old Lyme, Connecticut. We've had 2 broods this year, one early with the ducklings almost adult size now, and one this week. They're mallards. I didn't realise gulls predated ducklings and always thought they were being eaten by coyotes or foxes. Don't get many coyotes here, Chris. The females bring the young to under our feeders to eat. My question is, though, is birdseed a good diet for young ducklings? The new brood seems awfully small to be eating seed. Also, does the new brood have a good chance of survival? It seems rather late.
No, many waterfowl species, particularly if they lost their first brood, will go for a second brood, and that's quite normal. And we've got some youngsters on the duck pond which you met face to face last week. They walked up past us, and I think there was 10. There's now about 7 remaining, and they're doing quite well, and they stand a fair chance of getting through. Now the problem is ducklings have down on them, and they've got to go through all their growth processes to engage in their first molt, which will be proper feathers, and those feathers are waterproof and they'll get them through the winter months, but they've got a long way to go to that. Now the second one is the food source. Generally, if they can get onto water, the young ducklings self-feed almost from the word go, and they'll catch insects and dart about on the top of the water as though they've got little batteries in them, in their feet, and they swim about at great speed, and that's natural food for them, and that's the very best. But they can eat seeds. My young ducklings are only just over the week old, and they're coming up and they're eating the remnants of the grain left by the goslings here, little crumbs, and that seems to suit them ideally. But for large grains, it's really difficult for them because the only way they can digest those is to eat grit, and the grit actually grinds the grain up, and because the young ducklings' gizzards aren't developed fully enough for large grain yet, that's best that they don't eat that. Tiny grains or something sort of rolled up into crumbs would be ideal for them.
Well, it's a long way from Norwich, England, to Connecticut, USA, and it's even further to the other side of the states, over on the west coast, San Diego. And Sarah is in San Diego in California and sending a sound for us to listen to. So before we go any further, let's have a listen and see what you think, Chris. Well, Sarah says, I just wanted to share with you a little bit of mockingbird. There's one that sits right on the top of our neighbour's jacaranda tree in the morning, singing his heart out. I'm assuming it's a male and it's mating time. They also sing right through the night, which is lovely to hear. Oh, Sarah, bringing us a flavour of California there.
You're telling me. The sound varies much more than I thought it would do. I thought it was all held on one key, but it varies up and down, and it is quite sort of soporific, I suppose you'd call it, particularly if you heard it in the middle of the night, and I can see why that's really comforting. But it's certainly mating season over there for them, and it's a male mockingbird doing what mockingbirds do best.
It reminds me of a song. McGill 5 had the hit, didn't they? In this country, at least.
Yes, they did.
Mockingbird Hill.
Yeah, exactly that, yes, and that's often what they do. They'll choose high ground or a treetop to sing from, rather like some of our resident thrush species here in the UK, like the mistle thrush will do that, also called the stormcock, and it kind of mocking the storms as they arrive, so that would be the mistle thrush, and lots of other birds will do the same thing, sing from the top of a tree.
It's a wonderful sound to hear. And Sarah, thank you very much for sending it. And thanks to everyone who's contacted us on the programme as Rat decides to take part just as we're closing. If you want to email, chris@countrysidepodcast.co.uk. chris@countrysidepodcast.co.uk. And Chris has a whole office of staff back at the farm filing through the letters, and we'll be back again next week.
Yes, all being well, we'll be back bright and shiny next week. And
he wants to come in.
Rat's
come on, Rat, in you come.
In there, there's plenty of seat. Come on my lap. Very good boy. I don't know what he's been doing. It's best not to ask. But yes, it's going to be a busy week on the farm. And now we've got some proper summer weather here. We hope to enjoy some different species of butterfly next week, including those elusive speckled woods. I'll get you up close and personal, I promise.
What about the bright, elusive butterfly of love?
Oh, well, we'll give that a miss for this week. It's too hot.
It's overrated, I think.
This is a Soundyard production. Music is by Tom Harris.
Hello, it's Anna and Sophie from Soundyard here. Our new service, Spoken Stories, is an incredible experience where we record the stories and voice of your loved one, which you can then hold on to forever.
It makes for an incredible gift, and anyone can make one. Take a listen to this. It beautifully captures the thoughts and feelings of life from a 6-year-old's perspective.
I'm 6 years old and I love running around. I can run very, very fast, but I'm even faster on my bike. That's why I love biking. It makes me feel energetic. And also I bike loads of places. I like doing sports like dodgeball. The people that are in charge in the world, well, I think that there should be no one in charge at all. So everyone's in charge. So there's no person that's in charge. So everyone is a bit more free. That's what I think. Well, what I try to change at the moment is global warming. It's when us humans litter, destroy the planet and all its nature. That's global warming. It makes me feel sad. And also, if us humans keep doing that, it could destroy the whole planet Earth, and then all of the human beings will be destroyed. I try to stop global warming, and also in my coat pocket I have a bit of Kit Kat litter I found on the floor once. I love the planet more than anything. Grown-ups should be stopping global warming, because grown-ups are more powerful than kids. But if kids can be more powerful than grown-ups, kids and grown-ups can work together and do it. Kids should be able to do the same things as grown-ups. They should have more rights. Well, I love myself because that I believe in a lot of things. That's what I love about myself. I like being a kid, but because when I'm a grown up, I'm going to have my own kids because that's what I want. And also, I'm a bit worried to have kids, and I'm still going to be a kid for like a long time. So I'm glad that's actually going to happen. I'm glad I'm going to stay a kid for a long time. I'm going to have kids because I want to know what it feels like to be a parent. I'm going to be a good parent.
Isn't that just gorgeous? If you'd like to find out more about recording a spoken story of your own, or you'd like to buy this as a present for someone, take a look at our website, www.soundyard.org/spoken stories, and take advantage of our introductory offer. Alternatively, you can get in touch via email hello@soundyard.org.
And if the internet isn't an option, you can leave a message with your details on our landline number. It's 01603 273 899, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can.